Hello and welcome to this tutorial for Cinelerra CV, where I'm going to try and show you how to make a light bloom, which is basically a cinematic effect when you have a light behind an object and the light kind of appears to enclose that object and obscure parts of the front of it. It's kind of like a halo effect. If a light's coming through the windows, you might not be able to see the window frame quite so clearly, that kind of thing. And this is an approximation of that effect, and just a general way of enhancing and brightening the light sources in a video without brightening all of the things around it, which usually happens to an extent even when you use the histogram to just brighten up certain points. So the first thing you want is 3 tracks with identical clips on them. We're going to turn off the top 2 tracks and work mainly with the lower one. This effect involves creating alpha masks and then rerouting those masks onto other tracks. It's very, very similar to the setup I use in my tutorial on making the most out of the title effect, and so I encourage you to check that out if you want to hear me talk a little bit more about what I'm doing in a technical sense, why it works, what the masks are, where they're going, that kind of thing. In this, I'm just going to show you what to do, rather than explaining why it works. So let's arm the first track. First thing to do is to drop a chroma key onto it, just a regular chroma key, not the HSV. Let's look at the level I've chosen there. Basically, for the colour you want to choose the colour of your light source, in this case white. Threshold is how much or how little is actually blocked out, and slope is kind of the gradient around it. I'm not going to choose too much slope, basically because later we're going to blur the mask itself, and if it's too much of it around it is blurred, it will have the effect of making more of the whole thing blurred rather than just the light source. So I'm going to leave it about there. Make sure use value is checked when you're doing this, because that means that your masking out brightness and darkness is taken into account instead of just the amount of the colour. So try and keep the slope reasonably low, but get rid of the worst of the harsh edges like that, and mask it out until you've masked out all of the points where there should be light, like the torch beam and that space behind the men in the background there. The next thing you need to do is to find the reroute effect, and make sure that target track is top, operation is alpha replace. Now scroll up to the top track, right click, attach effect, choose reroute and double click it, and it will appear on there. Turn both the second tracks on again. The next thing you need to do is to find the invert video, drop that on, and make sure that it is inverting only the alpha. If you invert the rest of it, it's going to start looking really weird, and that is not what you want. So just alpha. Now, you can do this with gamma or you can do this with brightness and contrast. I'm going to do it with brightness and contrast. As you can see, that's very harsh, but certainly gives a clear effect. And now drop a blur and only blur the alpha. And as you can see, the more I blur it, the more the whole thing takes on a dreamlike effect, because the mask does exist kind of on more than just the light, unfortunately. But just blur it a little bit to take away the harsh edges, and perhaps we'll take that down a little bit. And as you can see, the difference is immediate, and actually that here is quite harsh, so again, it might be worth... I mean, these are all things that you can fiddle with. What I would probably try doing is playing with the mask on the bottom track. I might, try increasing or decreasing the brightness and contrast, but effectively, if you play this now, here towards the end, you can see, especially right here, it's much brighter. It's the original, and that's it with the effect. Original, and here you can see the light comes all the way across the front of the ribcage there of the skeleton. It's much better backlit behind them, but the rest of this is not overlit as it would be if I tried to just add a brightness effect onto the whole thing. So that's the basics of how to play around with your light sources and enhance them in Cinelerra. Of course, if you wanted to be really flashy, you can always do something like drop a colour balance onto there and actually change the hue of the light, but I'm sure you can all use your imaginations as to what you can do now that you've isolated the light sources and what kind of other cool effects you can add onto there. Happy editing!